Welcome to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast, powered by StatRoute.com. And now, here's your host, Ryan Skullroot.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullroot, and we have our weekly Waiver Wire Madness episode. I hope you guys are ready for it. We've got a couple of little gems that we hope will help you this next week, and hopefully beyond that as well, going through this fantasy season, as we are now a quarter of the way through the fantasy football season. For those of you who say, well, my league plays 17 weeks, so it's not quite a quarter, well, then you don't need that kind of negativity in your life, and you need to get out of those leagues. We've got no announcements tonight. We're going to hop right into the stories and then get into the waiver wire pickups for this week. And so let's get going.
Today's headlines.
All right, story number one. According to Adam Schefter, Davante Adams is unlikely to play in Dallas this Sunday. From what I have seen, I believe this is a turf toe injury, which is basically like a sprain of the tendons in your toe that make it very difficult to walk, to plant, and so forth. After having a really horrible beginning of the season and then finally breaking out, 15 targets, 10 catches for 180 yards, and now I have to suffer turf toe, and he's going to struggle. He's probably not going to play this next week. That is really tough, not only on Davante Adams, but for fantasy owners. Let's be honest, we are a fantasy football advice website, and that hurts. So, especially a guy that everyone was figuring was going to be the number one wide receiver in fantasy this year. So, tough break so far for Davante Adams. Hopefully, he is able to get through this pretty quickly and get back on the field. But again, it does not look likely that he is going to be on the field for Week 5 against Dallas. Moving on to our next story, Mitchell Trubisky. It looks like he has officially suffered what looks like a dislocated left shoulder and likely torn labrum. I think it was a partially torn labrum in his left shoulder. So he is so far, it looks like they are not electing to do surgery. This is something that he could possibly come back from pretty quickly, especially since it's in his non-throwing shoulder. He will travel with the Bears to London for the London game against the Raiders this next Sunday. That being said, he is not likely to play. I believe after the London game is their bye week in Week 6. So he could potentially only miss one game due to the injury. So as far as the rest of the team goes in terms of fantasy, this kills Allen Robinson. It kind of kills David Montgomery. It helps out Tariq Cohen because that's about the only guy that that Chase Daniel seems to like throwing to. So hopefully Trubisky can get back and actually play pretty well, but I'm not holding my breath. Moving on, our last major story. This is an interesting tidbit that we found on Sleeper. Christian McCaffrey is currently playing 98.5% of the Carolina running back snaps. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because there was a lot of speculation and talk that he was going to be somewhat limited in terms of at the goal line. They didn't want to overwork him. He has played 264 of the 268 running back snaps so far for the Carolina Panthers this season. He is on pace for 344 carries, 100 receptions. That's 444 total touches. I want to say a couple years ago, part of the reason why, or the reason that Le'Veon Bell had his big holdout last year was because he didn't want the Steelers to overuse him because he had like 407 touches in 2017. So, I mean, absolute craziness in terms of how much usage he's getting right now. On pace for 444 touches, 2,516 total yards. The record for total yards in a season was set by Chris Johnson in 2009 when he ran for 2,000 yards. His record was 2,509 total yards. So, I mean, he's on pace for a record-breaking season. We'll see what he can do with it, and we'll see if Carolina kind of slows him down a little bit. Who knows? But as of right now, he's even with that quote-unquote stinker of a game that he had against was it Tampa Bay, he's still on pace to put up quite the season. So moving on, some of the smaller stories. Rashad Penny, who has suffered a hamstring strain, I believe it was. As of right now, Pete Carroll says he should play Thursday Night Football against the Rams. Sam Darnold is working out again, hoping to get back as quickly as possible. Let's see. It says that he has been cleared for non-contact drills, but not quite all clear they were hoping for. He has not lifted or ran or thrown since contracting mono, so he will ramp it up this week, and hopefully he can be ready for the Week 5 matchup. TJ Hawkinson, despite landing hard on his right shoulder and head Sunday and then being carted off the field, Detroit will not be placing him on injured reserve per source, so they're hoping that he is able to come back semi-quickly from this injury. Kyle Allen will start this Sunday against Jacksonville for Carolina. Cam Newton is still out with the Liz Frank injury. This is our waiver wire episode, and I know that this guy isn't listed later because our waiver wire we typically list at 50% or below is what qualifies to be listed. This guy is owned in 54% of leagues, but looking at his splits, he's on pace for a phenomenal season. At 54% owned in Yahoo, Cortland Sutton right now is on pace for 128 targets, 88 catches, 1,236 yards and 8 touchdowns. That was the same kind of pace that Geronimo Allison was on last year before he got injured. I hope I don't, knock on wood. I don't know if you guys heard that. That he doesn't get injured and can keep up this kind of pace. He has not been targeted less than 7 times yet in a game by Joe Flacco. Flacco seems to trust him, so he should put up quite the season this year. So that being said, if he is available in your leagues, which he's available in a couple of mine, do everything you can to go out and get him. I think that he could continue to put up decent numbers throughout the rest of the season. Vontaze Burfict has been suspended for the rest of the season for his nasty hit on Sunday, helmet-to-helmet hit. Good riddance to him. Broncos outside linebacker Bradley Chubb suffered a torn ACL. He is out for the rest of the season. And Jay Gruden is unsure of who he is going to start at QB this Sunday for the Redskins. Looking at all three, is going to kind of wait and see how they practice after all through Wednesday. So that is it for the headlines. We've got a couple little commercials coming up to help pay the bills, and then we will get into our waiver wire madness. Have your fantasy teams been struggling this year? Or perhaps you've been doing pretty well but want to put yourself over the top? Then make sure to visit our friends over at Finish First Fantasy Advisors. They are the premier one-on-one consulting firm that specializes in providing you with expert support to help guide you to the championship. You will be matched with one of their expert advisors to provide you with the season-long insight for your redraft, dynasty, or DFS formats. Their advisors will contact you weekly to answer all of your questions and provide you the needed information to get to the next level. Set up a free 15-minute consultation by emailing them at info@finishfirstfantasy.com or by visiting them at www.finishfirstfantasy.com. That's www.finishfirstfantasy.com.
Waiver Wire Madness.
All right, so let's go ahead and go through these waiver wire pickups for this week. I'll be honest, the pickings are kind of slim. Looking at, when we try to keep it to players that are owned in less than 50% of leagues, it can make it a little difficult sometimes, especially when you're getting deeper in the season, to find guys that are actually worth picking up. That being said, I think we have found a couple to talk about. So, number one in the quarterbacks, Andy Dalton, owned in 36% of leagues. I know he didn't have a great night tonight going up against the Pittsburgh defense. He does not travel well. He doesn't. That being said, he did play pretty well in Seattle in the first game of the season. But he is playing against Arizona at home, and Arizona's defense has been getting absolutely torched all season long. And so I think that he is a streamable option for those of you who are facing a bye week this week with your quarterback. I think that Dalton could be a streamable option because of the plus matchup going up against Arizona. Number two is Jacoby Brissett. Again, owned in 36% of leagues. He's going up against Kansas City. Kansas City has given up a lot of yards and has given up some touchdowns. The thing about them is that they usually, except for in Detroit, they get so far ahead that everyone else is playing catch up. They kind of play a little bit of, not necessarily prevent defense, but they can afford to get a little more aggressive and make a few more mistakes. Brissett has the ability to run the ball a little bit too, so I think that he could provide, again, a streamable option. I'm not looking for these aren't guys that are going to blow the doors off. I'm looking for guys that can provide 250 and 2 or 251 and 50 yards rushing, somewhere in that range. So again, I think that both Dalton and Brissett could put up streamable options, streamable numbers for this week in their matchups in Week 5. Moving on to the running backs. Number one, I have Jalen Samuels at 30. He's 30% owned in Yahoo. He's going up against Baltimore. I believe this game is going to be at home for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jalen Samuels had quite the night tonight. They got him a lot more involved in the offense. Running some stuff from the Wildcats, basically doing some, quote unquote touch passes. Basically it snaps it back to him in the Wildcat, and then he just kind of touches it and kind of holds it out forward and lets go of it so that James Conner can catch it. It's technically a pass. Really, it's a jet sweep is really what it is. But his ability to, him doing that tonight provided some open holes for Connor to get some work. And also he faked the little handoff to Connor and was able to run it himself and gain some yardage too. So, Jalen Samuels, if they continue to use him this way, I think that could be something to help get this offense really going for the Steelers. And so could provide a lot of help in terms of the offense for Pittsburgh. The next running back pickup that I have, this is kind of a lower end, kind of a lottery pick type. Jeff Wilson, owned in 5% of leagues, a running back for the San Francisco 49ers, going up against Cleveland this week. And the thing about Jeff Wilson is what he has done so far this year, especially week 2 and week 3. He has been basically the goal line back. Finished 10 attempts, 34 yards and 2 touchdowns against Cincinnati, and then against Pittsburgh at home, 8 attempts for 18 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has basically become the goal line back. Now, if Coleman comes back, it could take away Jeff Wilson's goal line touches. And again, like I'm telling you, it was hard to find players that I thought were actually going to be worth the pickup that far down, owning less than 50% of leagues already. So the pickings have been slim. So this isn't a great pick, I can admit. Maybe Raheem Mostert, I believe he was owned in like 30% of leagues. You maybe go that route instead. Again, I'm just saying this is an option. Kind of see what where Tevin Coleman is, so that you can make a proper decision in terms of that one. So next are wide receiver pickups. We have a few more names in here. There's a lot more wide receivers in the league, so there's usually more names to pick from. In terms of number 1, I have Jamison Crowder playing at Philadelphia this next week, 45% owned. They've given up the 4th most points to wide receivers so far this season in fantasy. This all depends on Sam Darnold and what he's possibly going to be doing, and if he can come back for week 5. If he can't, well, Jamison Crowder isn't really probably going to do all that much. But kind of wait and check out to see what the news is saying on Tuesday, to maybe kind of get a feel and see if you can hear anything about what's going on with Sam Darnold. If you have the open spot to hold him and you need the wide receiver help, then that could probably work out for you. So, number 2, I have Golden Tate, 49% owned, going up against Minnesota this week. Minnesota, who's normally known for a stout defense, has given up the 12th most amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. I think that it will help Daniel Jones, though he hasn't been playing horrible. He's been playing pretty good. And obviously showing rookie, the fact that he is a rookie with some of his turnovers. I think that it will help to have someone like Golden Tate to play in there with him. I know that Sterling Shepard runs about 75 to 79% of his routes out of the slot, which, that's going to affect Golden Tate. We'll kind of see how those two guys intermingle, work together. They could just run, a slot guy on each side with Melvin or with Evan Ingram running up the middle. So who knows? But again, Golden Tate, I think that he could provide a semi-decent option with a quarterback who's willing to throw the ball and has so far has a pretty live arm. A couple of the deeper guys that I'm looking at, A.J. Brown, 10% owned. He's going up against Buffalo. This isn't a great option for this week. I think that it could be a tough matchup, but going out through the rest of the season, he could be a solid pickup. The last one is Deontay Johnson, again, going against Baltimore, 6% owned, had a decent game tonight, has played pretty well the last couple weeks. He is definitely ahead of James Washington in terms of the wide receiver pecking order in Pittsburgh. And Baltimore has been giving up the 10th most amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. So there's that. The last couple here, tight end pickups. Jimmy Graham owned in 37% of leagues, going at Dallas, giving up the 8th most amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. Definitely a guy that they've been wanting to get more involved. Got him more involved this last week against Philadelphia. I think that especially if Davante Adams is out, that this could provide more work for Jimmy Graham. And the last one, Tyler Eifert, 16% owned, again, going up against Arizona. Arizona's given up the most fantasy points to tight ends all season. They have been absolutely getting torn apart. And Tyler Eifert has had at least 5 targets in 3 of the 4 games so far this season. So, again, this is more of a streaming option. Jimmy Graham could be more of a long-term option. So that's what I'm looking at there. So, all right, that is it for tonight. Guys, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, my name is Ryan Skullroot. I hope you guys are able to get everyone that you need to help your teams win this next week. These next couple episodes, we will be going over all of the matchups for Week 5. Looking forward to it. Hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you later.